All right, welcome back to the web series. Today we're going to interview Mike to talk about investment banking. Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Awesome, so let's jump into it. One of the first things I like to do is give our audience a little bit of knowledge about who you are. And I think it's also worth discussing a little bit about why you were interested in investment banking.
Yeah, so my background, my name is Mike Talley. I grew up in the Philadelphia area, went to Shippensburg University, played college football, and majored in accounting in undergrad. So out of undergrad, I joined a public accounting firm, got my CPA, and did 4 years of public accounting and audit. So I was just kind of preparing financial statements for companies for a few years. Had an opportunity to work at the Carlyle Group, which is a big private equity firm based out of DC. Jumped in there. Really enjoyed the role, but the most interesting aspect was kind of learning about more the front end of that business. So private equity is a huge industry where you're deploying, trillions of dollars capital a year. I learned more about that, got to know a bunch of the deal team guys, and quickly realized that almost all of them had done investment banking at some point. Knew that I was really interested in finance. And I knew, like, ultimately I wanted to have a career in finance. So I pulled the trigger and ended up getting the MBA specifically for the purpose to get into investment banking. So that was like when I was doing applications, I wrote about banking. When I was doing my visits, I talked to all the bankers. I did a lot of due diligence. Ultimately, that's why I decided to come to Emory's, because I knew I'd be able to accomplish my goal of working either on Wall Street or in one of these middle market banks in the Southeast. So yeah, that's I guess my background and why I chose banking.
No, that's great. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more actually about banking. So give us kind of the 1,000-foot level of what the industry looks like.
Yeah, so investment banking in general is going to be broken up into two groups. That's going to be coverage and product. So just banking in general is advisory for companies. So a good way to explain it is like a real estate broker is for a house, like you're a real estate broker for a company. So that would be sell side M&A. In coverage, you're going to be covering a specific sector. So for me personally, I'll be joining SunTrust Robinson Humphrey, soon to be probably in the next week, Truist Securities, where I'll be covering consumer and retail companies. And what that means is we have a bunch of different MDs that cover food products, gambling, leisure products like boat companies, and Topgolf is one of our clients, or Yeti, to even like apparel companies. So basically, we service their needs. So whether it's capital raising, whether an IPO or debt capital markets or leverage finance, if they're a non-investment grade company, which at SunTrust is middle market, so most of them are non-investment grade, almost all of them are. So capital raising, or if they wanted to do buy a company or sell themselves, so that would be buy side or sell side M&A. I think it's unbelievably interesting just because it's tied to so many different things. Like it's tied to economics, it's tied to finance. Like when you're doing a sell-side M&A process, you're learning everything about the company more than the people that even run it. So you're learning about their operations. So I feel like even though it's a really finance-heavy role, you're flexing a lot of the muscles that you learn in your core. So to me, it was way more interesting than anything I'd done before. My summer, I interned in LevFin, which is syndicated and leverage finance, which is term loans and high yield notes for non-investment grade companies. And then the consumer retail, I'll be joining consumer retail full time. I just started a few weeks ago. I'll be joining the team full time, hitting the desk right after Labor Day.
So jumping back real quick, so coverage and then product. Can you touch a little bit upon what product is?
Yeah, so product is those specific products in the sense like M&A is a specific product. And like, so for SunTrust now, M&A is actually integrated into the coverage groups. So you don't have to do just M&A. All the banks are different though. So I know Goldman is like the standard bearer for like having integrated M&A teams, but JP Morgan has a separate one where Jefferies has a completely separate M&A team as well. And then LevFin is a product as well. So that's going to be probably the only other one that people recruiting for banking are be going for. Those are the two big products. And then coverage groups can go anywhere from healthcare, industrials, consumer retail, financial sponsors, which is private equity firms, and then like tech, TMT, which is telecommunications, media, and technology, but generally they're split up between that and tech.
Hmm.
So those are probably the big coverage groups, and then big product groups as well.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, let's go to a little bit of your experience on the summer, just so people understand what summer investment banking could look like.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think one of the things with banking is you work a lot, and I put in a decent bit of hours. But I think it was really interesting, and most of the hours were Monday through Thursday anyway. And it's not like a really intense job where you're just grinding for 16 hours a day. There's like kind of a cadence to it where you get in, you kind of wrap something up in the morning, and you're basically assigned different projects. So like I was on a sell side M&A. I was on a pitch, which is just a meeting with, like, one of your managing directors will have a meeting with the CEO, and then the sell side. So you're basically like, you join the team and you're on these different phases of projects. So you have, a pitch that's just starting. So you got to like build out a shell deck. So you have initial meetings with people you were staffed with, like an associate or a VP, and then you have an analyst as well that you generally would like report to. And as an intern, you're not that important, so you kind of want to bow to everybody that's full time. And then you'll jump into a live M&A for sell side. So like my coverage internship was only 6 weeks. Sell sides generally last between 12 months and 9 months. So I only saw a little bit of 2 different sell sides. And what that is like I was in the diligence phase for private equity firms that were thinking about buying our client. And that was really interesting because you listen to these private equity firms drill into the management team and ask them different questions about what they're worried about. So you get to think about what an investor is worried about with the client, and then you're trying to best prepare your client on the other side for these meetings by answering all the questions that you expect these other private equity firms to answer. So you're doing a lot of, second level thinking in the sense that like, what are these guys going to ask? And then like, how can I answer this to make this a more attractive asset for my client? So it's a lot of that, and balancing between working on PowerPoint slides, working in Excel, building out, a model or just different tables and stuff that you have to do. I got to work on an IPO, which was pretty interesting. I know my group covered the IPO, the Peloton IPO, while I was over the year after I finished my internship. So that was for the coverage. So you're doing a whole span of different things. It was really interesting. Every day was way different. You're really kind of in the weeds with the negotiations. Like some of the negotiations were really intense. Like one of our buyers basically went like 40% below his bid, and the MD was furious, and you had to see how he reacted with it, and like if his client had the back. And it was like unbelievably interesting to sit and listen to the call where this guy just got the worst news possible and how he handled it. So there's a lot of different things to do, and the basic skill set is like staying organized and like responding to emails immediately and just making sure you know what you need to do. So it's not really difficult, and they give you little bite sizes. Like my first day's assignment was like, you have to put 2 pictures next to each other and make sure they're aligned. And then it's like, all right, put some words next to them and make sure that they're sentences. And then it's like, all right, well, you did those 2 things competently. Maybe you could do the whole slide. All right, now finish the slide. And then you kind of develop your role from there. And then you earn more trust. You're going to make mistakes. The idea is not to make a bunch of them. And then quite frankly, my product when I was doing LevFin, it was very similar, but it was exclusively for like LBOs and debt, which is almost how everything is bought in just corporate America, is through an LBO. So you're going to use some portion of debt to fund purchases. And I got to know that intimately, know the different role of term loans, learn about the credit markets, learned how loans are syndicated. And I'm not going to be going back to that, but now I have knowledge of it, and I think it's super helpful. That's one of the things I learned the most about business school is debt, quite frankly. You learn a lot about credit markets, how companies utilize debt. And that's something that if you're, like for me, I didn't really know much about it, even though I worked at a private equity firm, but now I definitely leveled up there, at least, for sure.
Yeah, and in kind of regards to other classmates who went to investment banking, was there any, individuals who you just knew had a very different experience, or was the experience relatively similar in terms of just a lot of opportunities to work in a deal or things of that nature?
Yeah, I think it's a very people business. So all the meetings are person to person. It's very transactional in the sense that but it's in the sense that everything is driven by like the desire to get more transactions and fees. But So with that said, it's a very people-driven business. So like the attitude of your MD might completely change like your life for the summer.
Yeah.
My classmates up in New York, they might have worked a little bit more. So I was in Atlanta at SunTrust, and I worked probably 10% less than they did, maybe a little bit less than that. But the New York summers were maybe just a little bit more intense, a little bit later nights. But it was just generally the same thing. They would work on bigger transactions. And then I had folks in some of my classmates in Chicago and Charlotte and LA, and say they had very similar experiences that I did. It wasn't like I had some uniquely amazing stuff. One of the coolest things was myself and Olivia were working on the same different sides of the same transaction. So they were doing the M&A, they were doing the sell side for El Dorado, which acquired Caesars Casinos, which now is like a crazy thing to think of, like the $17 billion LBO for a company that has zero revenue right now. But she was on the sell side for that, and then I jumped in and was able to do the debt side, which is like the biggest deal of the whole summer and one of the biggest fee events for SunTrust. And I just saw her, like, she texted me something about them like celebrating at work, and I'm like, I'm on the same deal, which I don't know. It's a small world. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So yeah, I mean, it's generally the same job. So SunTrust is considered a middle market company. Wells Fargo would be considered like like an upper middle market. William Blair in Chicago, which is where Oscar is, that's a middle market firm. Harris Williams, which we have some alumni at, is a middle market firm, like one of the better middle market firms. And then you have like the big bulge brackets or the big boutiques, like Perla Weinberg Partners, where Chad's at. That's an elite boutique where they're doing strictly M&A advisory. And then the big bulge brackets, like JP Morgan, we have a ton of alumni at. Bank of America, we have a bunch of alumni at. They are very similar to SunTrust, but they just do way, way bigger deals because they have, 8 times the balance sheet.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So for those students who are super interested in investment banking, let's talk a little bit about breaking in. So when you think about preparing for recruiting and interviews, what did you kind of do and how did that preparation kind of work?
Yeah, so I mentioned in the beginning that I knew that I was going to do banking from the beginning, but that's definitely not the case for like everybody, and it's not required either. There was a lot of career switchers that went into investment banking. For me, a lot of the advice I got from people like at Welcome Weekend and beforehand to prepare for banking, like even before I stepped foot on campus, which might be a little late for this year, but I mean, basically what they said was don't worry about it and just follow what the finance club tells you to do when you get on campus. So if you haven't done anything at this point, you haven't met with the finance club, you're really not behind yet. The biggest things are you get to know the second years as well as you can. So I met with all the second years at least twice. And those meetings, it's like coffee chats. Everything for your semester is going to be coffee chat driven. So you get coffee chats with second years to learn more about their respective bank, what the job actually is, because you have to have a really good understanding of what an associate does, like what the bank does, like what is an M&A transaction, why do they do them, what is Lev Fin, like explain that to somebody. And if you don't know any of that now, that's perfectly fine. You have a bunch of classmates that were our first years that are going to be your second years that'll basically you'll learn about their summer. Carson Gernard is he's going to be finance club president, so he's a great resource. He was a rock star last year. So basically when I set up foot on campus, again, I talked to all the second years, working on my resume walk, which is basically like a 2-minute spiel designed exclusively for like investment banking. So you're highlighting like fast-paced teamwork, any financial transactions you worked on, anything in the financial markets you might have potentially worked on. And then you're going to have a why banking story that you're going to work on like religiously. And those are things that you're going to have when you're talking to alumni. They're going to be unbelievably important when you're doing your interviews, your first round interviews, when you're doing your super days. Like those are the things that are going to be the beginnings of every single one. So you start with working on those, and then you slowly layer in like technicals and behaviorals. And technicals are, you have to learn the ins and outs of accounting and valuation and just the basics, nothing unbelievably intense. And you have a few months to learn it before people start asking you technicals. So technicals would be walk $10 of depreciation through the financial statements. And then a more complicated one would be, well, what if that fixed asset had a $5 impairment charge? Walk that through the financial statements. And then like a valuation question would be like, name the 3 valuation methods. And then they would ask you more about the discounted cash flow analysis. Like what is the capital asset pricing model? Why do they use beta? Where would you get the cost of equity? What is the, so that is the basics of technicals, and you do this over the whole semester. So you start basically knowing nothing. You go in, you get with your second years, you learn from them, you meet with them. Slowly, alumni events will start. I know this year might be a little bit different just because everything's going to be virtual, but I know Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, and SunTrust are going to be the three first banks to meet you guys. So get to know them, get to know the alumni, make a good impression, be very professional. A big part of it is learning how to stay organized with your emails, because all your communication is through emails. And like one of the most ridiculous things is that like you can't send typos. I mean, it's not ridiculous, but you can't send any emails with typos in them. So like I had my wife, who's an attorney, review literally every single email I sent, which was like thousands of emails over the course of her semester. So I think that's probably the basics. I don't want to get
No,
too
yeah, that was really good. And just to get a little bit more specific, so IB is one of the industries that's just quicker in terms of timeline. You could
Yeah.
just talk a little bit about that, so people are kind of aware of what that looks like.
Yeah. So I mean, it starts as soon as you get on campus, because I know for me, who is like going to be a new alumni, like I'm going to be texting Ian and Udhay about like who they like what do they know people, so things start immediately. So as soon as you step foot on campus, if you're interested in banking, you should start reaching out to second years, and sign up for the finance club. That's like the best resource for sure. Make sure you reach out to Cassie, get your resume in order, and you want to think of everything in the lens of everything is banking. So like your resume is, if you're recruiting for, I wouldn't recommend recruiting for something in addition to banking. I can't imagine people, I don't know what you guys do specifically with consulting, but I know for banking, we recommend you to, if you want to do banking, I would focus 100% of your energy on it, because it's one of those things that takes a lot. And one of the biggest things that you're trying to prove over the semester is that you actually want to do banking, and you're not just trying to find any job that's just lucky. So, and to be convincing with that is to have your resume geared toward banking, to have your resume walk geared toward banking, your why banking story is really fleshed out and makes a lot of sense and ties to your background, your industry group that you want to go to ultimately. These aren't things you got to figure out when you step foot on campus, but those are things that's like at the end when you're doing your super days, like you need to have all that polished and in the same direction. So when you step foot on campus, the best thing to do is to get to know your second years and ask them what they did and how they think that you should prepare.
Awesome.
That's a
Yeah,
really
just no, yeah. But just to kind of let people know that banking is one of the, if not the first industry that starts on campus, so that it's not applicable to every industry, but yeah, it's something
I
to be
think
aware
they'll
of.
probably have 2 weeks before there's a finance club meeting ish. And you don't want to miss any of those, even if you're not 100% sure about it. But then by GCC, which I'm not sure how that's going to work this year, was a big event. Virtual this year. So that was Goldman, JP Morgan, and SunTrust were there. So that's and Bowstring as well. So that's a great opportunity to meet some banks. So that's like third week of September, I think.
Yeah.
So I think by then is probably about the latest that you should probably think about switching.
Yeah, I think moral of the story is if you are even remotely interested in investment banking, just dive in, because it's going to happen faster than the other industries. Like even if you're deciding between, let's say investment banking and consulting, give investment banking a try first, see what your interest is for, a month or so. And then if you don't like it, jump consulting. If you do like it, then just double down on investment banking, because that's kind of how it's going to work.
And so just to be clear though, like one of the things that I've heard so many times is people don't know what they want to do, and they are like scared of certain things. So I think investment banking for sure, if you like finance, honestly, it's more of a marketing role than I thought marketing would be. Like marketing is like all analytics, which I didn't know until business school. I thought it was all PowerPoint slides, but that's literally all investment banking is like PowerPoint slides. So, and like selling stuff and being like, think about different ways to market things. So investment banking is one of those skills that if you're interested in finance and want to have a career in finance long-term, you can't go wrong with having an internship in investment banking. Yeah. So if you're on the fence that you're not sure if you want to work at Amazon or you want to work at an investment banking firm, or you don't know what you want to do long-term, I think investment banking is very safe in the sense that you'll make a lot of money and you'll have a really like a good resume too. So there's not a lot of negative trade-offs. You work a lot, but hopefully if you're going to the MBA, you're willing to do at least some of the work. So anyway, I
Yeah.
think that it's one of those things. It's more attractive than I think some people give it credit for because of the optionality after you graduate and after you do a year or two of investment banking.
Yeah,
You could
absolutely.
ultimately do anything you would have recruited for anyway, just at a couple levels higher that would have taken a long time to climb.
Yeah, so let's quickly go through some of these other ones. Just in terms of recruiting opportunities on campus versus off campus, how does that look for IB?
So traditionally, we would have J.P. Morgan, Wells Fargo, BMO, and did I say SunTrust? So those would be the big ones that come to campus. And then in October, generally the first or second week of October, depending on like what's going on with the class, like how prepared they are, we release the alumni list, which is like curated every year. You go through and you make sure all the alumni for all the different banks are on there, and basically the second years, let them know, and you start reaching out to them, and you start at the associate ranks and move your way up. So that's when it kind of goes off campus, when you're scheduling phone calls, and then that's generally the trek is generally at the end of October, and that's a week on Wall Street, which is a lot of fun. You go to, I think we went to 10 or 11 banks. You go, you get to go to their offices, you go upstairs, you go to the conference room that overlooks the, Statue of Liberty, and you get to meet a bunch of our alumni or some senior bankers that they bring in, talk about their experience, what makes Citi different from JP Morgan, from Goldman, from Jeffries or Perella Weinberg Partners. And it's really interesting to see them back to back because some of the banks, some of the guys have like red rashes up their neck because they've been working so hard, and some of the guys have put on 50 pounds, and some of them look like they're like living their best life, and that's the place you want to work. So it's really interesting. And then you use the last 2 days. There's an alumni happy hour. There's invite only events for the certain banks where they bring you to steakhouses and wine and dine you. You get to know some bankers personally. So it's a really unbelievable experience. And then from then, basically every Friday you fly up until you have an offer. So you fly up on the 6 a.m. flight, you get in there, you start having meetings between 9:30 and 10 whenever you can get into Manhattan. And then you have meetings until basically 6 p.m. where you got to catch a flight back to LaGuardia to fly home. So I did that, I think 4 or 5 times until I ultimately got an offer and was done.
Yeah.
So even though I was recruiting, one of the big things is even though I was recruiting Atlanta, I recruited New York. It's like very, very hard. So my first offer came from a Wall Street bank. Ultimately, me and my family wanted to stay in Atlanta, so that was the best option for us. But ultimately, to be successful in any, if you want to do Charlotte or you want to do Chicago and you don't want to do New York specifically, you still need to recruit New York because they want to see you committed to the process and that you want to do banking for banking, not just for the high comp in a low cost living city.
Awesome. We're going to jump into the interview a little bit, but one of the things that I think is beneficial to talk about is does investment, from my knowledge, investment banking doesn't recruit as much for full-time. It's mainly internship. So but I was always told if you want to do investment banking, certainly do it for the internship. And then if you don't like it, pivot out. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So I think, yeah, exactly. I don't know anybody that got a full-time investment banking job at like a major firm that didn't intern after their first year. So, well, I tell you, there are some people that did something that recruited really hard, missed it, and then ended up getting their second year.
Yeah.
But they like never really stopped recruiting, and quite frankly, got very, very lucky.
Yeah.
So it's something that can happen. Like we have some alumni at some major banks like RBC and some other places that kind of like scratched and clawed their way in. But for the most part, the most tried and true way is 100%. Yeah, you want to do the internship and then translate full time.
Awesome.
I don't know of anybody that. Well, maybe we have one classmate, I guess, that. But he got an offer to a different group because his group disbanded in the middle of the summer. It was a really unique opportunity, like a really weird circumstance. It isn't like a traditional thing. But basically, everybody that gets a return offer for investment banking almost assuredly accepts it because most of them have really good summers. Most of them really like it. Some people have switched groups because they didn't like a specific like team that they were on because they wanted to work in tech instead of real estate or whatever. So that's another long.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the interview and just briefly, because this is not something that anybody should be focusing on right this moment, but it's at least worth being aware of.
Yeah, I think honestly, the good thing about investment banking is the stuff that you're preparing for that when you step foot on campus, like the resume walk and the why banking story is exactly what you're right. Like that's how all of your interviews are going to start is tell me about yourself. Then you're going to do your resume walk. Then you're going to be, then you're going to tell your why banking story. Then you're going to be like, why Wells Fargo, why SunTrust, why JP Morgan. And you're going to point to all the, the 10 or 15 people you talk to at each of those banks. And then it's going to go into maybe some behaviorals and then some technicals. So those are the things that you'll be working on throughout all the coffee chats. So you'll have a lot of reps. So there's definitely mock interviews and it's a good thing to do. But it's not something that I think is, it's not completely different than the rest of the experience. So you're going to do, I think I did like 100 coffee chats, maybe more. Almost all of them went exactly how my first round interviews was. And then, so first, the way it works in investment banking is you have a first round interview, and then you're later invited to a super day. And the super days are a lot different. Super days are, they're different everywhere. Some people will be like 8 interviews. Some will just be 3 20-minute interviews, and then you're done. So that's going to be a little bit more specific, but we have a really nice resource where it's, all the super days, we've kept track of everybody's questions that they've gotten from all the different banks and all the different rounds. So if you have a super day at Goldman, you can know what our classmates were asked, or you have an interview at SunTrust, you can know exactly what our classmates were asked over the last couple of years. So it's a good resource, and it really helps, makes interview prep a little bit easier for some of the behaviorals that might be off the wall, or some of the goofy technical questions that might come up that are specific to certain banks.
So in kind of closing this out, I have 2 last questions. The first one is just more specifically, if you watch this video, you're interested in investment banking to any degree and want to learn more, what would be kind of your first 2 or 3 things that you would recommend somebody doing after this video?
First 2 things would be, you want to reach out to Carson Gernert. He is going to be the new Finance Club president this year. He's a rock star. He'll be coordinating with the rest of his classmates, so definitely go through him. And then Cassie York is the CMC person designated for investment banking. She started when I was recruiting for banking, and she's been unbelievably helpful. She really knows the process really well. She's really good with why banking, resume walk stuff, resume help in general, and then the behavioral stuff when you're doing interview prep kind of in October, November. So those would be the 2 big things, I think. I don't know if you're supposed to reach out to your CMC coach before school or whatever, but it can't hurt. It's just cassie.york@emory.edu. And then I don't know how to spell Carson's name off the top of my head, but he'll be the president of the Finance Club. The best thing to do with that would be just attend the first meeting and then go from there. So after the first Finance Club meeting, that's when they basically open up coffee chats for the rest of the second years. So that would be the best time that would be what I would suggest.
Yeah, you don't need to reach out to second years right now until you have that first Finance Club meeting.
Yeah, they might not even be done their internship yet, so they might not have time to do anything.
I don't know that they're done. The schedule this year is a little bit different. So my last question, which I've kind of been asking everyone, is just kind of your closing thoughts. 1 or 2 things that you'd like to kind of tell this incoming MBA class. It could be recruiting, it could be non-recruiting, it could be kind of anything that you want to say to them.
Yeah, so recruiting was one of my favorite parts of business school, honestly. So I really enjoyed the people that you recruit with, you get to know really well. I have some unforgettable memories, on rooftops after a hard day of recruiting in New York, having a bunch of drinks with some of my classmates, or during the trek, or, early morning flights to New York. So recruiting could be daunting up front, but it's unbelievable experience where it's very, very unique, and there's offers for everybody. So it's not something I'd stress about. So if you're having second thoughts about it, I think just pulling the trigger and going for investment banking is a worthy pursuit, because it's hard, and the rewards are good, because it's a very interesting, good job that opens up unbelievable career paths. You're going to make a lot of money. It's really interesting, and I'm just so happy I did it. I made so many friends doing it. My only friends first semester, or during core, were the kids I recruited for banking with, and my core team, and kind of section C. But I was never. I was just so focused on banking that I got to know them so intimately well. It was awesome, and banking recruiting, another benefit of it is it's done really early. So you have your winter break, and then you have the rest of it. You're basically your business school to. I learned how to golf, so like it's anyway. So that's you have a lot to look forward to. Don't be like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. If you're going to do it, just do it, and I think then you'll be successful.
Awesome. Well, that concludes our conversation about investment banking. Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, awesome. Hopefully, I talk to some of you guys this coming year.